There is another program similar to that in Microsoft Word. So that program allows for the more ease of using comics in the classroom because the stressfulness of fitting art into a panel and word balloons and stuff like that is taken out, and you can use that in
This Comic Life is the Mac. Is it the same for the PC?
PC is called Comic Maker.
Comic Maker?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to at least talk to you guys about resources and examples of comics to be used for in the classroom, and we'll come back with a conclusion in a second.
So I'm going to sit right here. I hope nobody minds that. So basically, thank you, Rickson, for talking about why comics are great in general. Well, the reason why we're all here is we're also talking about, why Chinese, and I'm sure everybody has heard these 3 points at this conference at least 100 times. 1/4 of the world speaks Chinese. China is the fastest growing economy, and China has a long history. So I don't need to go over that stuff. But then why? The big question is, why use comics to teach Chinese? And this is something that Chinabooks has been a big advocate for. We've really been trying to bring a lot of comics from China and Taiwan. And I was talking to a teacher the other day, and she asked me, so is it popular? Is this a big craze for comics and learning Chinese? And I had to honestly say, no, it's not actually. Comics are not our best sellers at Chinabooks. And a big reason is because, as we all are here, is because learning Chinese is a relatively new concept in the United States. And using comics in education is also new in the United States. So we got a new on top of a new, so right now it's not something that is really catching on. So this is something that I wanted to focus on today, was why are we using it for Chinese? And one thing is that pictures help tell parts of stories to bridge gaps of new or unfamiliar characters. And the reality is, the difference from learning English and Chinese is that when somebody learns English, they can probably pronounce every word and figure out and get the root of each word. If you see, like pictures help tell parts of stories, you can actually read that and understand it and make sense. But for somebody studying Chinese and as a student of Chinese, you end up missing like every other word. How do you fill in those holes? Chinese is really hard. You can't just guess what that character is. And a lot of it, and that's what the illustrations help you do, is they help you contextualize a phrase. So that's why it becomes even more important to have illustrations. This is something that, stimulation is even more important due to the high dropout rate after the first year. Chinese is 3 times harder than Spanish. So the reason why we have to stimulate the students to learn Chinese even more than, say, the other languages that students are learning today is that Chinese is really hard. Everybody takes 1 year and then they drop out the 2nd year because it's so hard for us to learn. So we have to keep it especially interesting for the students. Also, this is something else that I have a lot of friends who are teachers these days, and I feel like they're being required so much more than, say, generations before. I mean, teachers are not just educators and supporters, but now they kind of have to be entertainers because students have less of attention span. We have internet and text messaging and movies and all of that to think. But right now, you really have to engage them with creativity. And this is something that, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the book Picturing Chinese with Richard Gu from Northwestern. He had a PhD on using humor in the classroom. And I think that's so important in American schools. You have to use humor, and you have to be engaging, and with a language that is so difficult like Chinese, it's especially important. So also, how can you get a child interested in China if you're not near anything Chinese? So who lives in, say, the Midwest? Who lives in, where do you live?
Minnesota.
Minnesota. Who lives somewhere where there's not a Chinatown? Where do you live?
Florida.
And where do
You
you
know
live?
about Chinatown in Florida?
Ohio.
Ohio. So we have Ohio, we have Minnesota, we have Florida. How do you keep these students interested in China? And how do you, if there's not anything, they're not near anything Chinese, How do you get them engaged in contemporary Chinese culture? Chinese restaurants, that's good. So I wanted to go over an example today about why illustrations really pull you in, like pull a child in. So let's all picture us being children right now. And we see these words on a page. And we're kind of, you know, Chinese is hard. It might be overwhelming to see these blank words on a page. So then a lot of textbooks are using Ying to help them. Let's make it less intimidating. Let's Romanize some of the words. So we got Chinese and Pinyin. So that's a lot of how the textbooks are now too. We got Chinese and Pinyin. But even that might be hard for a student. So then they throw English. We got Chinese, English, and that. You know, we have all three of those. And so that's one way that textbooks have been engaging them. Now this is the example that I have. And is there a Chinese teacher that would like to read this? Got a Chinese teacher?
I can read it.
All right, go ahead.
我保证去了医院不让医生给你打针，不过你得换上这条裤子。
And what does that mean?
I promise that when you go to the hospital, the doctor won't give you a shot on the butt, but you have to change on this. You have to change on this pen, this pair of pants.
And then you can see like the pair of pants have a zipper right there for them to make it easy access to get a shot. Yeah. So what is the difference from this, or this, or this, and this? Like there's a pretty big difference as far as wanting you to bring you in to a passage. And I think a big thing with so far is that a lot of our comics and a lot of comic books have pretty advanced Chinese. So how do you bring a student into something that's kind of a complicated sentence? And a lot of it is doing what we just did right now. You know, taking some time and slowly breaking it up. And they're gonna want to spend time with it because there's illustrations there. They're gonna want to sit down and go over the sentence and go over each word because they really want to know why there's a pair of pants with a zipper on it like that. So your brain likes comics. The brain's neural networks have three forms of learning and memorization. There's concrete. So this would include, like, if let's say you went to the beach and you went and you felt the sand and you heard the ocean and you smelled the air, and then 2 months later you could come back to that because you remember it. You have that entire experience. The other way of memorizing something would be representational, like the visual stimuli, like of a chart or a poster. So if you hold an apple and you want to talk about apple, you have an apple right there to talk about it. And then the abstract way of memorizing something, and this is actually used a lot in language classes just because of time. You know, how often can you take your entire classroom to a beach to really go over beaches? And this just includes memorizing the meaning a word through another word. So there's three different ways of memorizing things, and if we had an ideal situation and we wanted to teach Chinese, we would take all of our students to the beach every day, and we would pick out shells, and we would look out into the ocean, and every student would be able to memorize everything because they're surrounded by everything they're learning. But the reality is we can't do that. So that's why everybody in the classroom makes charts and posters and things like that. And this is just using comics is just another way of associating illustrations with what you're learning. So accompanied by illustrations, new vocabulary and terms have a higher chance for long-term memorization. Instead of just saying apple, penguo, you can say apple and then have a graphic novel right there. So right now, since Thien and I keep talking about how great comics are for group exercise, I wanted to give you guys 5 or 10 minutes and to do an exercise right now, and then we can share our experiences with it. So the one